And now, same apartment that potentially would be renting for say like $3,000, they are renting for like $300 a month. I had promised that I was going to talk about sort of the whole what's happening in California with the rent control, right? And so it's not just about California. What I really wanted to focus on is what does rent control mean, and sort of what are the processes and kind of how this whole thing works, right? So rent control sounds kind of good. Or potentially bad. I don't know. It just depends from which side of the coin you are taking a look at. If you are a renter, something like a rent control may sound really amazing to you, because what it does is prevents the landlords from raising the prices to kind of meet the market demand. And so that's kind of cool piece, because right, you might be able to get in. And so one of the places is New York City. New York City has had rent controls for a little while, and folks would get into a property as a tenant, for example, and then they would live there for 20 years or whatever. And now, same apartment that potentially would be renting for say like $3,000, they are renting for like $300 a month. It sounds really, really cool. And one of the benefits is, of course, that if you stay within the property for many years, it kind of locks you in the price, and that price doesn't fluctuate a whole lot or at all whatsoever. The downside of it is what happens on the landlord side of things. So for the landlords that have purchased properties, 20 years ago, it doesn't necessarily have as much of an impact, because they purchased it at a price, at a point where it might make sense for them to rent it for like that $300. And well, yeah, it'd be cool to get it for $2,000 because it increases profitability. You are okay. You're still making money. What happens is that folks that might have purchased it 6 months ago or today or a year ago, where they have purchased it on the future earnings. This is how the market is played in expensive markets. So LA, San Francisco, Miami, New York City, Boston, Seattle, Portland, you name it, every city that is what is known as that expensive city, where the rent to value ratio does not make sense, and whatever you get from the rental, you will be losing money for a few years. The game that investors play is that the price will go up, the rental will go up, and eventually at some point in the future, they will start making money. That's what the game is. Now with rent control, that prohibits folks from being able to make money in the future, and we will likely see many new landlords or properties that have been newly acquired, if they don't have a big portfolio that can support that stuff and they're not diversified, they're going to actually start losing money, and eventually they will lose the property. This can have a potential to make the prices go down, and it will make a potential where a lot of people will lose a lot of money, and a lot of new properties will be back on the market at potentially lower prices. Now, that sounds really cool today because we're comparing to kind of price to what's happening today. But in the future, if there is a flood of properties that are going out for sale and nobody wants to buy them, those properties end up falling in price. So that is the reason why I always talk about the importance of paying attention whether the property is profitable the day that you buy, whether that income is going to support the purchasing price. And that's why I haven't been investing in many of these very expensive areas, because it just doesn't make sense and it's a lot of risk. So that's where kind of the part of the problem comes in. Now, some of the landlords will get a bit creative. Here's where the problem comes in also for tenants and for everybody else, is that if they don't want to lose on the property, they might go out, rent it out, and then when that tenant, when the year lease expires and they can't raise rents to keep up with the property market values, they'll get creative. And here is the creativity. It will look something like this. They will go out to that tenant and say, hey, thanks, I know you have been an amazing tenant, but I can't afford to keep you, buddy, because I am losing money by having you. So they're going to end that lease and require that tenant to move out, effectively evicting that tenant out of the place so that they can get a new tenant at a higher rental, because that's what really rent control is. You can't increase the rent, or you can increase it only by a small portion, whatever the law says, to the ones that are currently in the property. Nothing in the law, typically, I don't know, I haven't read what exactly is going to happen, says that you can't increase the rent when a new person comes in. So we will see many people end up not being able to stay in the property, and we will see many people being asked to leave from their homes, right? I mean, if you think about it, it's a rental, it's a business, but it's also somebody's home. And so landlords will get creative and will basically ask folks to leave their home, find another one. But guess what happens when they go find another one? That another one is being rented at a higher price. So really, in theory, it sounds like a really cool thing for the renters, and it sounds like a really potential bad deals for the landlords. But in reality, not much is going to change. The only thing that is going to change is going to require a bit more work, and those landlords, instead of raising the rents 2%, might need to raise it 5% because they had to go in and fix stuff. The second thing that we also see in rent control places is that there is, of course, less investors that want to go there, so they'll go elsewhere. Duh, it makes sense. And California is already a place where it makes sense to go somewhere else, because California is high tax state. So even if you want to go in and get a property, you know, if you get an LLC, that is going to cost you mad money just to have it. Then it's going to take a large chunk of your returns of your income through taxes. So a lot of people have already been leaving California. I am one of the people that has left California. I used to have properties in California, and I said no more. That's it. I'm out. I don't care. And a few weeks ago, I was doing a video for y'all, kind of like, hey, you know, here's the stuff that is happening, and showcasing some of the tax deed sale market that is coming up. And I told you that I found one deal that I'm considering, but I wasn't going to share with you because, again, it was something that I was doing for myself. And you know, I've done the research, and it was a property that potentially could have a value of about $5 million that I could get in for about $500,000. Guys, that was an amazing deal, but there was a problem. It's located in California. It was located just outside of San Francisco, and I decided not to go in because it's California, and I didn't want anything to do with it. And now with the law change, I'm like, woohoo! That was a good decision, man. So please do pay attention to where you invest. But here's another problem that ends up happening with some of these properties, y'all, is that, you know, landlords stop paying attention to those properties and stop bringing it up. When the income doesn't support things and you can barely make the taxes, which are increasing in California consistently, the insurance, which is of course always increasing, and then the mortgage payment that hopefully is not increasing because you have taken a 30-year fixed rate loan. But if you're barely keeping up with that stuff to cover it, you don't have enough funds to go in and start fixing the properties. Now you're going to have deteriorating properties that nobody's fixing up. And yeah, the rent is not going up, but you're also not getting all the bells and whistles. So again, some of these policies sound really cool in theory, but in practice, they're not really all that great. I think there are better ways to fix problems by creating better jobs that pay a bit better so that folks can afford it. And I agree, the prices have been going absolutely nutso, but most of that comes from what's happening on the economy as a whole and what's happening with the interest rates and that kind of stuff. So that's something that, wanted to do this video to share it. So if you are a renter, that you understand what this potentially means. So don't start celebrating early, because it could have different complications that we're not just thinking about quite yet. If you are a landlord, here are some of the thoughts and ideas. And if you are somebody who is considering going into California, there are some of the other things that you can consider and you should consider whether you even want to get into California. I made that decision a long time ago and said, you know what, I'm out. I don't want to play in California. If things end up changing in California, cool, I will consider it. But as of right now, I have zero interest in having a business or investing in California, period. I hope this is helpful to you and that has opened your eyes to kind of what some of these things mean. Until next time, stay forever money blessed. And do remember, you are only one deal away. I want you to be happy. Don't you want to be happy? I want to be happy.